Hello everyone, welcome to a tactics video. This time I'm going to review the Q2 2024 balanced data slate. And when I say data slate, there's actually a lot to look at here. So in front of us, I've got 4 documents open, being what is commonly referred to as the FAQ, all the rule adjustments that GW have made, the balanced data slate itself, where any new rules or changes have occurred to Army rules, the points update called the Munitorum Field Manual, and one which I'll quickly touch on is then the tournament pack. So given we're in Q2 of 2024, it's been about a year since the first tournament pack of 40k 10th edition was released. So there's a lot to unpack. I'll do my best to be quite succinct and also provide a good summary as we go along, and then of course give my reflection how it impacts Guard, and the changes are pretty material, to use a business term. So first I'm going to look at the FAQ, because there's a couple of things here that definitely have impact on the way we play. And now, throughout the entire video, if we get anything wrong or missing a thing, please tell me in the comments, because I'm only one bloke, been working all day, having a quick look at this, plus some other YouTube videos, and also Goonhammer to see what other sort of changes they've noticed. So let's go through the first, which I think has some impact on the way we play. So this one basically talks about how you move units, which is a core rule. So basically they talk about, you have models which have overhanging bits and pieces. So if the base of the miniature, like this massive, looks like a massive demon prince or something, the base of the miniature, it has got bits hanging over the sides. Obviously it's great big wings. Now what this basically means, and if I get it wrong, tell me, is that despite the fact that the miniature can't finish within this terrain piece because its wings will get in the way, if it can move through and finish the move wholly outside the terrain piece, it can move through that terrain piece. So in the old rules, my understanding was you couldn't move in this scenario. Mr. Demon Prince or Mrs. Demon Prince couldn't move through because it couldn't physically fit through. Now, because it can finish the move on the other side, that's okay. So how it impacts Astra Militarum is clearly going to be our tanks. So the Rogal Dawn, Limb and Rust battle tanks, and even made the Baneblade family with the sponsons hanging off the side. That means we can now fit into tighter places, or fit through tighter places. So you can't finish the move in that terrain area, but you can move through that terrain area. So that is definitely an improvement for all large miniatures, because obviously, particularly in UK TC terrain, there are particular boards where even the Rogal Dawn and even Limb and Rust does often get stuck. But I definitely know in some of the terrain placement layouts that the Limb and Rust will have more movement opportunity now, because it can basically go through the terrain piece. And of course though, just like this illustration, the base of the miniature has to be able to fit through that gap. So a Limb and Rust width, I'm very confident there's a couple of terrain layouts where now I can actually get through. So that will help Astra Militarum vehicles, and of course all other armies with big nice tanks and monsters. Okay, the next one which definitely impacts the way we play is now these pivot rules. Now, this was kind of something that was spoken about a lot in the previous rules, but kind of implied. So what this means, and I don't have a miniature to display, but if I use my phone, is that if this is the tank and it's facing that way, if you want to basically pivot the tank and get it through terrain like that, you are meant to basically count the movement, this pivot, as basically a move. So you'd have to get like you take measurements to kind of agree with your opponent that this is 1 inch, that is 2 inch, or that's 3 inch, for examples. Now, I won't go through all this, but they're very, very clear now that the pivot value of any model which doesn't have a base, i.e. tanks, any pivot value is worth 2 inches. So I think it's great they've clarified this, because I've definitely played games where people will just pivot it and move it for free, like the pivot costs 0, even though the miniature is moving. But I think making this very clear for anybody, be it a veteran or a new player, is super helpful. I think there's one nice example. So if we go here, yeah, this is a good example. So this vehicle's got a total move of 12, this Rhino. So you can move it, it moves 6, it then moves 4, and remember that if you move like that, because the direction of travel remains the same, that counts as a move. So it's moved 6 straight, moves side 4, then it's pivoted 2. So that becomes the total of 4 plus 6, 6 plus 4 equals, plus 2 equals 12. Now another thing is that if you make multiple pivots, let's pretend you're given a Limb and Rust battle tank or a Scout Sentinel, move plus an advance, and you've rolled a magic 6 and you've got 9, is it 21 inches out of that move potentially? So if you want to pivot twice, it just counts as 2 inches. So you can basically move it, move it like a hellhound, because the Scout Sentinel's got a base, so ignore that. You can basically move the hellhound, pivot it to get through some terrain, and then pivot it again to move forward. That pivot only costs you 2 inches. So I think that makes it a lot clearer to everybody, because definitely, as I've said, I've played games where people have been quite liberal on how they move the pivot around. So again, Astra Militarum, whilst I think I said vehicles, the Scout Sentinel family and the Armored Sentinel, I don't have it applied to because I've got a big base, but obviously, you know, Hellhounds, Lehman Russ family, Rogel Dawns, etc., Manticores, which we'll talk about in a moment, they all have very distinct sort of rules for how you move and pivot those miniatures. That definitely helps. Okay, so I think that is up. Now we've got to get onto stratagems, so core stratagems. So there have been some changes. Some are quite technical-ish, some are a bit more important, definitely for us. So one thing for command reroll, they've basically put a rule in here, which means if you are fast dice rolling, select one of these rolls or saving throws to reroll. So in the old days, you had to, the strict way of playing 40k is if you wanted to use a command reroll, you had to roll every dice individually. So imagine you just wanted to keep it for the hit rolls. You have to roll 1, roll 2, roll 3. Now you can roll all the dice at once, and you can pick out one which missed and go, I want to re-roll this one. So this actually improves everybody's game state in the sense you can make a decision at a later point of knowing what's happened. Because previously, if you're rolling individual dice, you may want to re-roll the first dice you fail, but then you fail all 6 after that. So actually, there's no point in re-rolling just 1, for example. That's a bit of a technical one. The other ones is then grenade, and this is a nuanced one, is that if you fall back, you can't throw a grenade. So the only instance for Astra Militarum I know of is that if you've got a KD and Castellan attached to the unit and the unit falls back, you can no longer throw a grenade. And then there's an article from one of the community website, and the idea here is that if guys are falling back from combat, from a narrative point of view, they're probably not going to be pulling grenades out. Well, actually, they might be, but whatever. So that's a small one. Watch out for that. If your opponent falls back and can shoot, they can't throw a grenade. Okay, tank shock will definitely impact the way we play. Now this, if you remember, used to be based on the strength of the vehicle, and if it was higher than your opponent's toughness, it's +2 extra dice. So if you're putting in a Scout Sentinel into some infantry, you've got 9 dice. Strength 7 + 2 equals 9. That's 9 chances to do a mortal wound up to a max of 6. Now, that's been completely changed to where now you base it on the vehicle's toughness characteristic. So a Scout Sentinel is toughness 7. So it means you've got 5 dice, not 9 dice into infantry. So it's a bit of a downgrade for tank shock, but it did feel pretty absurd sometimes. Like you'd plow in, say, a Rogel Dawn, and you've got, 9 dice to basically go into infantry, but that's a bit of a change, so watch out for that. And the last one, definitely talk about for stratagems, won't impact us loads, we're not a big melee army, is Heroic Intervention is now 1 command point, previously 2. Okay, now before I forget, there is also one other big one. Okay, so I've almost forgotten a pretty key one before we get into the Astra Militarum changes, is that there's been, and I missed this, so thank you to whoever commented on one of my posts, is that Indirect Fire, the rule has been changed. Okay, so okay, so firstly, you -1, and your opponent gets +1 AP, essentially, or +1 save. So that remains. So you're still -1 to hit when you hit indirect, and then your opponent gets the benefits of cover. Now, the biggest change, the huge change, is that an unmodified hit roll of 1 to 3 always fails. Okay, so be clear, you're -1 to hit, the opponent gets the benefits of cover, and if you roll a 1 to 3, which is unmodified, you always miss. So that is massive for guard, because obviously one of the key things, which is quite cheesy, was you could get, say, indirect fire platforms, the tank platforms, to hit on 2s because of a Scout Sentinel. So that has gone completely. Hitting on 4s, full stop. You can reroll the 1s, of course, if you've got the Scout Sentinel still, but 2s and 3s are gone. So gone are the days of a Manticore or Basilisk being as accurate as Adeptus Custodes. That's gone. So definitely that is a huge change for the way Guard will be played. Now, as we'll get on to another point about the changes to Guard, is that basically this combined with something else I'll talk to in a moment, I think has killed off Guard Indirect completely. Because it was sort of like the anchor point for the army, and that has been removed significantly. So this is pretty big. I think one of my friends said is that interestingly now, your artillery doesn't actually need orders anymore, because if you've got a Manticore hitting on 4s, heavy keyword, -1 to hit, you're back to hitting on 4s. So if it keeps still, it's still hitting on 4s. Doesn't actually need an order anymore. So you could actually give the orders from Lord Solo Tank Commanders onto other units. So whilst it does kill off the accuracy element, it does free up other parts of our army to do other things. Now, the Manticore probably has more weight to it now, and we'll see some more changes on the Manticore and everything else. Given it's got the full rerolls against blast targets, that will heavily mitigate, obviously, losing better hits on 1s and 2s. Also, it makes me question then the Scout Sentinel. Is its role, is its synergy as strong as it was? Obviously, reroll 1s to hit in the shooting phase is still very powerful for direct fire, and definitely I use it a fair bit on my Lehman Russ to give it that extra boost. But given it no longer buffs, given it no longer buffs artillery, does it still have a role to play? And there's some more changes that we'll talk about in the Sentinel family. So almost forgot that one. Indirect fire now only hits on 4, 5, 6. So yeah, huge for Guard in the sense that our indirect platforms are now significantly less accurate. Okay. Now onto the balanced data slate. Now before I get into the Guard changes, there are a couple of changes that do affect some of our units. Now this affects everything, not just Guard. So firstly, modifying a stratagem CP costs. What this basically does is when a stratagem costs, when you can make a stratagem cost nothing, it's now only reduced by 1. So Asala Creed, her basically making a stratagem for free, it now costs basically -1. So Fields of Fire goes from 2 CP to 1 CP. Now that's obviously a nerf. Is it still going to be used? I think it is, because anything which reduces the cost of stratagems is helpful. And the other one, which also impacts Guard to a degree if you do play the miniature, is basically the Kalidas Assassin has been completely nerfed in the sense that before your opponent or you could choose a battle tactic stratagem that your opponent uses and make it cost an additional CP. But now they've got to be within 12 inches of that model. So that's a massive, massive change. And I mean, the Kalidas Assassin, if you were using it, was mostly for the up-down, and then also the CP increase was also nice to use. But I think for Guard, you probably don't use the Kalidas a whole lot. You probably just use like Gaunt's Ghost, maybe, for example, or the Scions to do that. So that's to be noted. Now, before I got to check on my notes, the other one we can't forget is that stratagems that bring back new units to your army. So the reinforcement stratagem for Astra Militarum. Now, you can only use this once per battle. This is also a massive change to the way we play Guard, because obviously with the reinforcement strat costing you 2 command points, you could pretty much bank on the fact you're going to have 3 extra units per game, because, you know, turn 2 you probably lose some infantry, turn 3 you lose more infantry, maybe Khazrakans or Rough Riders or Scout Sentinels, and obviously turn 4 you're going to lose stuff as well. So you were basically playing, you know, you could be playing, if you did it on the most expensive stuff, an army which essentially was 2,350 points, roughly, yeah? I was typically always doing it on Scions or infantry squads, so an extra, you know, 180 points roughly into your army. So now you can only do it once per battle. So there's a humongous change to the way we will play. So, yeah, and I think there's still obviously it's still a great stratagem. How you use it has to be a lot more surgical, and it's going to potentially affect the way you build the lists, and I'll talk about that at the end, and also what units you do that on. So that's another big impact for Astra Militarum. Okay, now onto actual Astra Militarum, and this is where it gets very interesting. So the voice of command rule hasn't changed. This was all changed a couple of balanced data slates ago, where The key thing is officers can give an order having disembarked from a transport or arrived on the battlefield from reinforcements or reserves. However, our detachment rule has changed completely. So gone is the previous one where if you remain stationary, all Astra Militarum units get lethal hits in your turn. Yeah, in your turn, because they remain stationary. You can only remain stationary in your turn. Now that's been removed completely and changed too. Every time a model in a regiment unit from your army makes a ranged attack and that targets a visible unit, excluding monsters and vehicles, that attack has lethal hits. So regiment units are obviously all the battle line units, Tempestus Scions, Rough Riders, and the Sentinel family. Now they get lethal hits against non-monster and vehicle units. And a crucial part is that is at any time of the game. So Overwatch, in your opponent's turn, and if you've obviously moved as well. So this is basically Born Soldiers of 9th edition, but with some weird nuance that it only works if you can see the target and if it's essentially the same type of target, because, you know, most of regiment is infantry. Yeah. Now, is this good? Absolutely. Because against heavy infantry, where a lot of them are now toughness 6, so like I think some of the Orc units, Custodies are toughness 6, a lot of the Primaris Space Marines, like the Interceptors, they're toughness 6. You know, las guns against them are wounding on 6s. Then you obviously have to go, you actually got to hit then wound, so actually that is a buff into heavy infantry. But not having lethal hits into vehicles and monsters means that in certain scenarios and certain parts of the game, you're going back to having no regimental doctrine, no army doctrine, or detachment rule they call it here. So this is a fair bit of a, I'm going to swear, head fuck. And then the second piece is every time a squadron unit from your army, which is basically most of our vehicles, targets a monster or vehicle that it can see, you get lethal hits. So if a Rogal Dawn shoots a Rhino or shoots any other vehicle or monster, you get lethal hits. So this is then, okay, so you can't, okay, we've got, this is good. Yeah, lethal hits at all points in the game, in the shooting phase, is fantastic because in Overwatch it helps, and you can now move and actually have lethal hits. Gone are the days of making a decision to keep a Rogal Dawn still or leave in Russ, or move and actually play the game and be less deadly. Now, this would have been amazing if it didn't have these weird sort of nuances that, you know, infantry can only do it against non-monsters and vehicles can only do it against monsters and vehicles. So, as I said here, this really... Okay, so I'm trying to think versus the old, because we have to try and get a sense of all the changes that have occurred, is that our artillery is less effective, less accurate. It doesn't have lethal hits if it can't see stuff. So we've lost that completely, which sort of is a bit of an anchor point for most guard armies, indirect. But we've gained infantry is more effective into infantry, and vehicles are more effective into vehicles. So it'll all depend on which army you play and what point in the game your units are at. Because if you've got 20 Kazrakan, 20 Def Corps pointing into a Land Raider, they're as crap as they were before. However, in the previous rules, if they kept stationary, at least they're getting lethal hits against that toughness 11 vehicle. But now they don't. But then if your Lim and Russ shoots into that vehicle, it's more deadly. So yeah, this really puts us in a bit of a, I don't know, it's like seesaw down, seesaw up. And it's just a matter if the seesaw down is enough mitigated what we've got so far. And there's a bit more to discuss in a moment. So this, yeah, I'm trying to, I don't know. It's like infantry need the most help shooting into monsters and vehicles, yeah, because they're so much tougher now in 10th edition that las guns are just pointless. And just for last most of the time, you just roll them when you're getting super, super desperate. And then it's like, do our vehicle units need more help to kill other vehicles? I mean, we always want more help, but do we need more help? Like a Demolisher Siege Cannon, does it need more help killing other vehicles? I mean, you can't complain, but will that mitigate the fact that, you know, Indirect isn't as effective and our infantry still into vehicles is as crap as it was before? Because to be honest, like definitely, you know what you think. Like I was finding a lot of games I was playing, it's like you're playing without a regimental doctrine. Obviously, my Manticores, my Basilisk had it, but everything else, because it moved to play the game, didn't actually have any additional rules. But now they do into the right targets. So this is, yeah, very interesting. And obviously, they've completely pushed the game away from indirect. So, you know, don't hate the player, hate the game. But I really felt that indirect hitting on 2s, reroll 1s on a Manticore and a Basilisk was just absurd. But, you know, typical. You know, they created the problem, now they've dealt with it, but it's taken so long that, you know, a lot of us players have sort of built our foundations around a strong indirect castle, and now we've got to basically upend all of it. So with that, what have they done to our points? Okay, so points, there are quite a few changes. Now, firstly, Armoured Sentinels have gone down by 5 points. Used to be 70, now 65. Cool. Basilisks that went up, that have gone up, have now gone down by 10 points. Now, what else is there? The Death Strike got from 160 to 145, gone down by 15 points. Field Ordnance Battery has gone down by 10 points. The Kazkin Blob has gone down by 10 points, so it went up. It went from 100 points to 120, now 110. The Manticore went up to 190, previous is now down by 15 to 175. And the very last one, which is definitely awesome, is the Rogel Dawn, which has gone down the most by 20 points from 260 to 240. So it's almost like seesaw down, seesaw up, if that's the right analogy. So they really, this feels like they're pushing us in a certain direction. Yeah, so, you know, they've kind of realised that they've basically cut the life out of some of our key units, being Basilisk, Manticores, and I mean Death Strike, who'd have replaced a Death Strike in the Field Ordnance Battery. So obviously indirect has been cut big time, so they've made them cheaper. Is a Manticore 175 still good to use? Maybe. It doesn't get lethal hits, it's hitting on 4s. If it gets full rerolls into the right target, so maybe. You know, the Basilisk has still got the -2 to move, that's a good utility piece. But maybe you just go with the Earthshade Carriage Battery. The infantry model. Death Strikes, that's for lols. Field Ordnance Battery, I mean 110 for 2, I don't know, because they're only strength 7, aren't they, on the indirect piece. But maybe you bring the the 2 mega las cannons, because they're quite spicy, I think. Now the Rogel Dawn at 260 feels very, very effective from a points point of view. So 18 wounds, and if we work out points per wound, 240 divided by 18, that is 13 points per wound, and a Demolisher Lehman Russ has got 13 wounds. Oh, so the Rogel Dawn Battle Tank, from a points per wound point of view, is cheaper than a Demolisher Lehman Russ. I've got this right. 240 divided by 18 is 13. 200 points divided by 13 wounds is 15 points. So, that's good. And then combined with the fact that against other vehicles, you've got lethal hits. And then combined with the fact that this has probably got a better chance of moving through terrain now because the sponsons don't contribute to the calculation. That also helps. So, given we just had our Lehman Russes got cheaper in the previous Munitorum Field Manual a few months ago, and Rogel Dawns are 20 points cheaper, feels like the tanks are back on the menu, as everybody says. So that's good. Kazrakans are cheaper. That's good. They should still be 100 points. But the one combo I've thought up that may have legs is that given you can only reinforce once per game, and that obviously makes your decision point a lot sharper, is that are you going to then just take blobs of Armoured Sentinels? One blob of Armoured Sentinels is 195, or maybe even a blob of Scout Sentinels for 180. But given that you can only use it once, you want to make sure the unit you bring back is as expensive as possible or as effective as possible. That means, Kazrakans, killing them off early, maybe that's the way to go, because obviously Kazrakan are very effective. And you're probably only shooting into infantry targets, and now more reliable because of the lethal hits. So Kazkan or an Armoured Sentinel blob or a Scout Sentinel blob, you want to basically make sure that, you know, you're not doing it into a 5-man Tempestus Scion squad, because obviously they only have 50 points, but deep strike is deep strike. Or you want to basically do it onto like a mega blob of 20, you know, catechins worth 110 points, or 20 Cadians, or Death Corps infantrymen, that type of thing. So this is good. It's almost, you know, seesaw down with the indirect nerf. Lethal hits gone from indirect units, but then lethal hits on out the rest of the army, but into right targets, and point changes. This helps. So that's good. Now the final piece of the puzzle, and this is definitely not, this is more for those who are into the competitive side of things, is in the tournament pack, because I did a video analysis of all the different sort of new secondaries, the mission rules, and you can have a check out the video here. But basically, the key thing to think about was, of the recommended missions, and you can see they have 20 now, the actual primary mission, the mission rule, the deployment map, and they've got all these terrain layouts you can go through. How many of these would actually give the benefit for the battle line units? Now, if you don't know, actions are back, even though they didn't really go, but actions are a clear indicated rule now. And what they basically had in the new tournament, or the new mission cards, was that battle line units under some mission rules had specific benefits. So of all of these, 13 of the 20 new recommended missions have got a rule which impacts battle line units. So raise banners is you're going to score additional CP if a battle line unit performs an action on an objective, and it gives you extra victory points. It's then B, smoke and mirrors. You can put stuff in straight reserves. C, you get the benefits of cover in the first turn. Now D, swift action. A battle line unit can advance or fall back and perform an action. Number E is prepared positions, where basically battle units can use the go to ground stratagem, which is a 6-up invulnerable save or heroic intervention for 0 CP. And the other one, G, stalwarts, is you can shoot and still perform actions, and also perform actions if you're in engagement range with the enemy. So I didn't do that very well, but basically from all these 20 combinations, 13 have got rules which it does actually help to have battle line units. So having looked for, I can't remember exactly, but there are quite a few action-based secondary objectives. So you want to have battle line units, which I think makes it much easier to achieve it, because this, you know, well, it's easier to achieve it in the sense if it's swift action, you can advance and do the action. If it's stalwarts, you can still shoot the unit and perform the action, as opposed to, you know, wasting a unit that has to basically sit there and just do the action. So that's another combinational piece to tie into all of this thinking, is that, you know, there is 13 of 20, so I'm on the 50% move. 60, I think 60% the exact percentage of the new mission layouts do benefit battle line. Now this, of course, is just for tournament play. Depending on how you play 40k, you may play just you pull a card of the deck for one of each of these and just go off like the true combinational play, random play. Or but if you play more competitive, like I do with my friends, is we typically just pick one of these and go with it. Now the final piece of this for the really competitive view of playing the tournament is we don't know what the tournament organisers will pick, because there's obviously a lot here, and then again, I'm not super into the detail of this, but maybe some of these are too complicated with the way the primary mission interacts with the mission rule and interacts with the deployment zone. Now, one small point I did notice is that Sweeping Engagement and Dawn of War are only featured twice. Now, Sweeping Engagement is one of the new ones with like the Tetris layout. It's a bit like that, the deployment zone, so it's a bit like clunky to set up. It's a bit of a weird one. But yeah, so I think the main takeaway from this is that battle line units, you probably want to have more than less than you used to. So again, some of the top Astra Militarum builds would have like one battle line unit, some Catech and Jungle Fighters. And now you probably want to not have just one, maybe have 3 or 4, maybe even more than that, to sort of lean into the fact that, you know, if you are playing competitively, you've got a good chance of where they can actually do more than other units. But of course, still at the fundamentals of Guard, the changes to indirect and obviously the change to the way that lethal hits work is a massive change. So I think, I've been thinking about this a bit after work, is that I think on the balance of things, it's almost like we're probably neutral, yeah, because indirect was hitting so hard. Now it hits terrible, doesn't get lethal, so indirect's gone. But then units have got cheaper, particularly the Rogal Dawn, and we're more lethal into the right target. What I mean by the right target is that you want regiment, particularly infantry, shooting other infantry, not shooting into vehicles or monsters because you're wounding on sixes. And you do obviously want your monsters and vehicles to be your vehicles to be dealing with other vehicles. Now, of course, some matchups, if you're playing, say, let's pretend World Eaters, who are exclusively infantry most of the time, except for Angron, the big leader, that means your vehicles, our vehicles, have no buff. But to be fair, given that these vehicles that need the buff, that would be basically shooting them quite often, have to move, they didn't get a buff anyway in the old rules, yeah, because you moved, you didn't get lethal hits. So, yeah, I think we're probably in a neutral position. It will completely change the way you're going to build your lists. I think the other thing is, and this is going to take me a long time to get used to, is that with the new missions, particularly the new secondary piece, because actions are so much more common now in the decks, you probably want to be bringing a lot more battle line to sort of just, put them in certain places to do those actions. So it's yeah, I don't know. I'm still trying to. I mean, I don't play enough to make quick decisions, but I think the snapshot is we're going to have to change the way we think. Artillery is dead, although it felt like in the previous balance that we were moving away from that because manticores were quite expensive, so were basilisks, etc. They were getting very expensive. So it feels like us as a community were moving away from that. Things like Fields of Fire being now 1 CP with Castellan, Asala Creed, and reinforcements being cut big time. That is going to massively impact, firstly, your CP efficiency, but also the endless wave of infantrymen coming onto the tabletop, or Kazkun, or Scout Sentinels, or Armoured Sentinels. That's gone. So we're no longer playing with like a 2,300, 2,350 point army. You're now going to be playing with, at max, if you reinforce Armoured Sentinels, an army worth 2,195 points. So that's a big change. I definitely think that one. But again, is that offset by the other stuff, the lethal hits in the right targets, And I mean, you can still play. I mean, that's a thing. 175 for one. If you bring in basically the classic pair of a Basilisk and a Manticore, you've just saved yourself 25 points, yeah? Now, is that enough to mitigate the fact that they hit on 4s now? They don't get lethal hits? Don't know. But as said, the Basilisk still has utility. It slows things down. The Manticore has got full rerolls into the right target. So blast target, so that helps. But yeah, it's definitely a lot to think about. How long have we been talking? Let's just make sure I'm not blubbering out. Okay, so only 33 minutes. Jeez, good. Okay, but so yeah, so what do you think? There's a lot to digest here. I don't know which way I'm going to go. I mean, the obvious thing is Manticores are gone. Armoured Sentinels back. I mean, they are deceptively resilient. It's 2+ save in 10th edition is serious business because, even against AP2, you're saving on 3s pretty much all the time because you've always got cover. Versus obviously the Scout Sentinel, which is losing its synergy because indirect can only hit on 4s. Maybe Armoured Sentinels are the way to go, but I still think Scout Sentinels at 60 points, where the reroll once to hit in the shooting phase against one target is very, very powerful for basically everything because they typically, for me, support the Lehman Russ as they apply fire to one single target. But yeah, so what do you think? What have I missed? I've definitely missed a lot of other stuff in the rules changes because I always think they talked about 10th edition being simple to play, and it's definitely simpler to play, but then keeping track of what's going on, you need like, you need some idiot like me to try and interpret it for you, or you've got to go through each and every bit and try and work out what's changed because the other thing is they've got, I think at the back here, they've got all the questions that have been answered by the community, and it's like, this is getting pretty serious. Okay, that's rule commentary, but yeah, I mean, they are, and this is definitely an overall commentary, is they are doing a great job of keeping up with making the game as clean as possible. And I don't play any of the formats besides 40k, but I definitely get the impression other game formats in GW or outside, you can go years where basically it's an unbalanced game where one army is crazy good versus everything else is crazy crap, and that's just the way it is for a big period of time. And this gets into some wider points about GWs. They're becoming more and more of a successful business, that people are going to have more people working for them, which means they can put more time into basically updating the rules every quarter, which definitely is good for the overall state of the game. So yeah, so what do you think? What have I missed? How do you think Guard fared out of this? I value your perspective. I read all the comments. I might not always reply because I'm a busy dad, but I do value your perspective, and if I've got anything wrong, let me know as well. So if you enjoyed this video and want to support me, you can do so with a like, comment, or by subscribing. Watching any of my other YouTube videos, which I cover the hobby aspect, lore, and also tactics like this as well. Or feeling super generous, you can join my Patreon platoon, and I really appreciate the support from my current supporters. Let's get your bayonet sharp, let's go unoiled. Faith in the Emperor strong. Patreon platoon, sound off. Tank Commander Glenn. Tank Commander Watchdog Van Etten. Tank Commander Mitchell. Lieutenant Burke Nielsen. Lieutenant Smith. Colour Sergeant DuPont. Sergeant Adal. Scott. The Colonel Merrill. Veteran Gibson. Hall. Lundeen. Guardsman Beard. Coquelin, Flint, Hills, Malik, Nitin, Nguyen, Tom, Tompkin, Conscript de Paz, England, Evan Gunn, Gillian, Goodwin, King.